I have Dr. Habil Olaka, the CEO, Kenya Bankers Association. I have Madam Mary Ngechu, who chairs the KEPSA board focusing on MSMEs. And finally, I have Joanna Bixel, who is the founder and CEO of Kasha Global. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome on set. Let me kick off with Mr. Sharia Ali, if I may. When you hear the theme this year, resilience, rebuilding, and focusing on building back better, using MSMEs as the anchor here, what does that mean to you as Mastercard?
Well, Julian, SMEs in general are the lifeblood of any economy, and they account for 60% of the jobs in Africa. Yet they operate, in a cash-based economy, face a $330 billion financing gap, according to the World Bank. So it is really important for us to appreciate the fact that MSMEs, during the tough time or the volatile times, if we do not lend our helping hand, do not collectively collaborate and support our MSMEs, then when the good time comes and when you want to accelerate the growth, you will not have infrastructure and the distribution that you need through strong MSMEs to really make go of it. So I think for me, that is a key takeaway for all corporates, all key stakeholders of the ecosystem, that when we look at short-termism versus long-termism, we do not compromise on the sustainable growth of our economies by ignoring the MSME.
Very spot on introductory thoughts there coming from Sharia Ali. I should say you can be part of this conversation by tweeting at NTV Kenya at Mastercard MEA, and we shall be sure to sample some of your thoughts at the tail end of this conversation. Let me come to studio now to Madam Mary Ngechu, sitting at the KEPSA board where you oversee an entire umbrella of micro, small and medium-sized businesses. How is the present landscape like when you consider the multiplicity of shocks that we are all facing?
Thank you. I think at the KEPSA sector board of SMEs, we work a lot with SMEs across the sectors, different sectors, that is manufacturing, service and trade. And if you look in Kenya, a lot of SMEs, they suffer from being not licensed, so formalization. And a lot of SMEs are also suffering from lack of business skills and expensive business development services. So we have seen in statistics that a lot of businesses from SMEs will close within the first 5 years. And some of the things that we are doing at KEPSA is to try and see how it is that we are able to mitigate, to have conversation, capacity building, so that we're able to develop them and help them to recover, especially from the shock that is around with the COVID and other challenges that come with that. We collaborate with other business associations, we collaborate with other partners, development partners and the government, so that we're able to create a good environment for the SMEs to be able to thrive and to scale up. Our focus is on advocacy and policy for issues that cut across and scaling up the SMEs.
Thank you, Madam Mary, for that. And let me just now go back to Joanna, who is joining us virtually. Joanna, when you hear the theme for this year, resilience, rebuilding, building back better, what does that mean for Kasha Global?
So it's really interesting now because so much has changed over the years, and digitization has taken an even bigger forefront. And I think whereas in the past, digitization was mostly within tech startups, we're seeing that now proliferate through, the entire spectrum of MSMEs. And so with Kasha, we're really seeing that growth. And, we are a technology-driven logistics and retail platform optimized for women's health. And for us, we've been digital from the beginning. But we also see that translating also to our customers. Our customers are taking advantage of the ability to order health products confidentially. For example, the dukas we sell to and the pharmacies we sell to are able to create digital footprints just by ordering off of our platform, which enables them to get credit. So I think resiliency is transforming along with the times. And I think digitization is a key part of that. And we're excited to be a part of that as well.
Thank you so much, Joanna. And this conversation will be focusing largely on this issue of digitization and what it means for MSMEs. But let me come to Dr. Habil Olaka from the Kenya Bankers Association. Now, when you talk about shocks, you see it on the side where you largely assess risk and you determine how credit flows. How has this impacted you and your view on MSMEs as banks in Kenya?
Yeah, I think when you talk about shocks, I'll look at possibly a set of shocks. I think you have had a set of shocks that unfortunately the MSMEs have felt more than a fair share of the impact of the shocks. We talk about, for example, we had the interest capping regime where MSMEs really felt the impact in terms of lack of access to finance. We have had the COVID, for which they have had also more than a fair share of the impact because there was restriction in terms of movement, free access to the markets and all that. And MSMEs really felt the brunt of those shocks. Then, of course, you have got now the geopolitical developments that are currently being felt globally. And, of course, the MSMEs are equally significantly affected. Now, what happens is that in most of those shocks, the risk posture posed by the MSMEs, if you're looking at it from a credit appraisal point of view, becomes elevated. And therefore, their access to finance becomes even much more difficult, either not accessing or accessing it at a fairly elevated price. So from a credit appraisal point of view, I think MSMEs then face quite a challenge, and therefore the access to finance becomes a challenge. And I think the challenge we have for us as financiers is to be able to facilitate the SMEs, despite all these challenges, to be able to still access finance, not only accessing, but I think accessing it affordably.
Okay. Good thoughts there, Dr. Habil. Let me cross over to Sheria now. Sheria, when you look at our Kenyan statistics, the official data indicates that 8 out of 10 SMEs never cross the 5-year mark. So when you look at this as Mastercard, what does this tell you, especially given what Dr. Habil has just spoken about from a risk posture standpoint? How is the risk environment like in this market?
Yeah, that's a good question, Julian. Now, let's break it down, understand in a simple terminology what an SME experience is when setting up their business and what they need to succeed. So a few factors come to mind. They must have a healthy demand in the area of their coverage. They should have adequate capital to stock and manage inventory. Resources are needed, data and digital tools to view what sells, to ensure correct selection of products or services that they want to sell. They need credit to invest and grow their business. So I'll take an example of a woman in Kenya who sets up a shop to sell, let's say, soap, little baby food, tissues, and whatever else sells in that area. Now, twice a week, Nestle, Unilever, or other producers' vans come and she buys the stock using cash. Now, she is part of the cash economy. On the slightest hint of volatility, she will run out of cash and won't have funds to buy stock in a matter of weeks. Therefore, your figure, Julian, vis-a-vis success rate in Kenya is quite alarming, and that is rightfully so because the support doesn't exist. Now, let's bring in Mastercard's Just Luca program where she digitizes her sales data through training provided by Coral Action, support from Force for Good partners like Kasha, a banking partner like KCB that uses data to underwrite her for credit, and Unilever in this case sells the stock on credit. And thus now she will she'll begin to feel that she's part of the included financial services system, and she has access to financial services. So in simple terms, access to training, digital tools, resources, credit, and other financial services are critical for MSMEs to build sustainable businesses and for their survival.
Thank you for that, Sheria. Mary, let me come to you, just piggybacking on that point. Sustainability of MSMEs, given the statistics we have in terms of the attrition we experience at the 5-year mark, how is the lay of the land like, especially now when you consider that we're still nursing some overlays from COVID, interest caps, which Dr. Habil talked about?
Thank you. I'll talk about a few things that we have done at KEPSA, especially to help the SME to recover from COVID crises that have come in, and also with the Ukraine that are coming. We've had several programs. We have an accelerator program that we have been working through with the SMEs where we coach them, we mentor them, and we capacity build them. Simple things like making them to understand if they need to remodel their businesses so that they're able to work today or mitigate the new changes that have come up with the crisis of businesses today. We also have been having training for them to educate them on how they can be able to embrace the e-commerce. So we equip them with digital tools. We have a platform that we've put together that has digital training for the SMEs that they can be able to access. We have a very full brand program that we call Ajira that we're also working with SMEs and youth, especially in digitalization, where we are moving into digital transition, especially even for the government. So we have helped a lot of SMEs and a lot of youth to be able to access digital jobs. We have, during COVID, in partnership with development partners, we were able to give our SMEs money up to the level of 1.5 million unsecured and interest-free, so that they can be able to recover and hit back the road and develop their businesses. We work a lot for the SMEs and the big corporation, where we work with the corporation to mentor and help the SMEs and even add them in their supply value chain so that they're able to supply them, work with them so that they can be able to coach them and mentor them for growth.
All right, nothing about that. Joanna, give us your story from the Kasha perspective, why digitization for you is particularly important when it comes to tiding through the ups and downs of the business cycle that you face.
Yeah, with Kasha, actually digitization was part of our story from the very beginning. We sell health products as well as FMCG goods. And when you think about health products, you know, there's a lot of social stigma often involved with that, whether it's especially for women, but also for men. And I think, you know, digital tools and technologies really help unlock access in that sense. So at the beginning, when Kasha first started, we were a direct-to-consumer model, and people were able to order products confidentially, things such as contraceptives or HIV-related products. They could order that confidentially over just a basic mobile phone with USSD. And we still do that today. So as we've grown and scaled across multiple countries within East Africa. And then we started also selling in bulk to resellers. And that digitization was actually helping our customers grow their businesses. So as pharmacies are purchasing health products for their shop, we're creating a digital footprint. And then, of course, for us strategically, that data is absolutely critical. We can see our customer base. We can see the average basket size. We can project that. We can, you know, there's a lot of analysis we can do within the data, and that also helps open up opportunities for capital. And having that historical digitized data and then being able to forecast that in the future absolutely can support the growth of the company. When we also scale further, you know, if you have a digital platform, you're also able to monetize that platform. You can serve as a channel for manufacturers as well. And that's something that we do. And so, especially if you're looking to tap into multinational global manufacturers, you know, there is strong interest for digital, data-driven, direct-to-consumer models. And so, you know, for us, digital has been along the journey and will continue to be part of the journey.
Thank you, Joanna. And just on that note of digital, Dr. Habil, if you listen to Joanna, the underlying issue here is data and the availability of it and the reliability when it comes to the MSME side. When you look at it as a banker, just how challenging is it right now for MSMEs who come and maybe they have data gaps? How does it impact your decision?
Yeah, actually, that's one of the biggest challenges that you'll find that a financier has with most of the MSMEs, because one of the challenges is informality. Quite a number of them are still at that early stage. They haven't quite formalized their systems. You can't, they don't have any organized processing of data and even information about themselves. Now, a financier, one of the critical things he requires is information about the individual, because one of the things he has got to assess is the character, because the repayment capability of the applicant will depend on having built the character, having built information about the character. So you should be able to assess the probability of the individual being able to repay, and you assess that from the character. Now, the character is through the data that's available. So there are various sources in which you can be able to get data. One of the critical ones is, for example, the credit information sharing mechanism, where a lot of information from you know, the various sources, be it banks, be it information available about your credit capacity, would be stored. So the financier normally will assess that information to be able to make a credit decision. So the critical thing about data is that it then enables the assessor of the application to be able to tell on whether the credit worthiness of the individual can be assessed. Okay. Now, that's the critical thing on credit assessment. Now, there is also data that will then help the assessor to be able to assess, for example, projecting in terms of the capacity of the borrower to be able to repay. And you know, you do that through projection of the cash flows. Yes. Now, the projecting forward will depend on what is available. So based on what is available is what you'll build on to see the probability that this individual can be able to build up the cash flows, not only to meet the needs of the borrower, but also be able to put aside some cash to be able to repay back the borrowed amount. Okay. And so the credit assessor will be able to, using the data, will be able to assess all that. Mm-hmm. Now, if that data is not available, then you see we cannot even start. So we now have to use some proxy information to be able to assess the individual, and that becomes much more difficult.
That point by Dr. Habilo Laka takes us to a short break. We shall be right back, focusing still on this issue of digitization and data and why it is critical for the micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. Stay tuned to NTV.
What makes Domestos toilet cleaner unstoppable? Domestos does thousands of tests to make sure its thick bleach formula kills all known germs dead, keeping your home clean and safe from germs. Unstoppable Domestos kills all known germs dead.
New Sea-South Ultra Concentrate is my mom's choice. 1. It is 4 times more concentrated. 2. It's ready to use, no need to dilute. 3. It's packed with 4 times more fragrance. And it smells so good. 4. One bottle gives you 40 washes. That's 4 times more washes. New Sea-South Ultra Concentrate is 4 times more concentrated. For 4 times more washes and for 4 times more fragrance.
Download the M-Pesa app today to access M-Pesa Global Pay, a virtual Visa card that enables you to make global payments directly from your M-Pesa wallet. The world is yours.
Kenya National Blood Transfusion under the Ministry of Health invites you for the Damu Kenya Conference on 28th to 30th June 2022 at the Windsor Hotel and Country Club under the theme Transforming Blood Transfusion and Transplant Services for Improved Health Outcomes in Kenya and the region.
How sure are you that baby is yours? I've thought you're a bit smarter than that.
Shall soon find out who's smarter than who.
Your father is very handsome.
And very taken.
Since when has a man like that been satisfied with one woman?
I'm happy to present to you Malindi City Breeze Phase 2. The entire property is fenced, has mature mango trees. It's a property you can build up your getaway home. You can do a home here for Airbnb. Call us now on 0790 300 300.
Forum tonight, we are discussing matters regarding micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises and how we can support them to scale their business ventures to be able to be even bigger catalysts in the countries and the region's economy. Remember, you can be part of this conversation by tweeting at NTV Kenya at Mastercard MEA. We shall sample your thoughts at the last section of this discussion. And let me just continue the conversation. Mr. Sharia Ali, before we took the break, Dr. Habil Laka was telling us why digitization is important when it comes to access to data. One of the upshots of the COVID-19 pandemic is that indeed we saw an increased uptake of digitization because of the need for contactless engagement. How much has this changed the MSME landscape in your experience?
Well, it's quite interesting. Digitization in itself provides that impetus for a cash economy. Let's say an individual who's suffering from a cash economy and the lethargy that it brings into the system, it brings in the efficiency as a counter action. So Mastercard at the forefront of pioneering and implementing standards and providing secure digital solutions in our payment landscape. And when we think about the digital economy increasingly becoming the economy, it is both our business strategy and our social responsibility to ensure that people and organizations have access to the networks, tools, skills, and solutions that can help them reach their potential in a financially secure way. To your question, if the customer behavior warrants a shift from the conventional modes of payments, then SMEs must not be left out and must be supported in a cost-efficient manner. So looking to the future, I mean, we have digital currency, we have wallets, wearables, contactless, and QR codes, which are trending high as emerging payment technologies. I would like to share one interesting solution with you, which is SME in a box and simplify, whereby SMEs can adopt low-cost acceptance solutions. Our FI and fintech partners can build template-based e-commerce sites for them so that they can expand area of coverage and transact online. We are also working towards linking mobile money with traditional card payment methods, which will help Kenyans attract and transact not just with each other, but with the rest of the world. So in terms of digitalization in itself, it will bring in the efficiencies that we need within the MSME infrastructure to really power it up, to make it relevant, for it to also talk to the changing behaviors of the customers, because we have to admit, all the customers, like when we look at data, for example, post-COVID, we're seeing a spike in e-commerce. We're seeing 70% growth in e-commerce if we compare year on year. This year, when we have no controls or we have all these measures that we had in place for COVID removed, it's still growing at 70%. That tells me that the behavior is here to stay. And when the customer behavior changes, we have to equip the MSMEs with the right tools so that they can be relevant to that customer need the client is asking for.
Thank you for that, Sharia. And Joanna, as you'd imagine, and one of the questions which is being asked recurrently online based on your comments is that if Kasha has been digital driven from the start, just how much of a cost is it incurring to sustain business on a digital platform? How is the cost component of your business looking like, Joanna?
Yeah, I think the truth about digitization is it does require upfront investment if you become a digital and a tech-enabled company. And that changes many things, right? It changes in terms of your strategy in raising capital, because you need that upfront investment to be able to bring on engineers or to get the solutions and tools. Alternatively, if you don't want to build it yourself, you can partner with a company that's a digital partner. And I think that that's what we're seeing more and more. And the MSME space is everything from, mama mboga dukas all the way to high growth tech startups. And you do see them working in partnerships. So a company that has a strong technology infrastructure and platform can absolutely help facilitate access to capital for very small micro SMEs. So I think that that's a key piece. The beauty of that though, once you do have the data and you show some early results, you can leverage that data to be able to attract more capital into the business. And whether that's equity financing or working capital debt or other forms of financing, so that while there's more upfront cost related to the digital platform, the scale of growth is also so much higher and the ability to attract capital into the business is so much higher as well.
Thank you. And just for the sake of our viewers, when Joanna talks about equity financing, she basically means investors come and buy a stake of whatever percentage in your business. Let me come over to Mary Ngeshu. And Mary, let me bring it now home. One of the risk factors that the economy is now facing is that we are definitely going to an election. And one of the questions which is emerging, and we're also seeing that online, is what are some of the priority areas that KEPSA feels that the next administration should focus on to support the MSME segment?
The Thank you. At KEPSA, we've developed a manifest which we have been able to share with all the candidates who are coming in, from the presidential candidates to the governors who are coming on. And we are discussing about the priority areas that we really would want the next government to focus on for the SME. We have what we call the Big Four agenda. And within the Big Four agenda, there are some priority sectors that government has been able to map, and there are sectors where SMEs dominate. And I would give an example. If you look at agro-processing, is a sector where we have a lot of SMEs, and if you look at the challenges that SMEs would face in the agro-processing sector, starting from the machineries and starting from technology and capacity for them to understand. So some of the things we are recommending would be knowledge transfer for capacity building, especially the SMEs, so that they can be able to acquire the technical skills that is required for them in the manufacturing sector to improve and actualize the processing of their products. We are also proposing to the government that in terms of SME for capacity, we all the time say that SMEs are not able to meet demand because their capacities are low. Are we able to come up with ways of aggregating products and aggregating resources so that we can be able to support the SMEs? We have also areas that we are proposing, and we are saying we have the local content government that is pushing for local content products that are locally manufactured, and we are pushing that we buy locally from the government. And most SMEs may not be able to supply the government. Are there a mechanism that we can be able to put together so that if it is big organizations that get the tenders, whether it is on road construction or big government tenders, how can we be able to plug in the SMEs in the supply value chain so that SMEs can also be part of that? We are also pushing and recommending, do we have ways that we can be able to come up with a mechanism of evaluating the enablers who are supporting the SMEs? Do we have mechanism to evaluate the deliverables of what it is that we are promising? We are also looking into simplified tax regimes in terms of compliance and also standardizations and taxes. Do we really have to regulate the SMEs the same way that we are regulating the big organization? Can we come up with a policy where we can allow growth in terms of standardization? That if you are small, compliance for standardization, you are regulated this way. For your tax, can we come up with the methods that you can start and then you grow yourself to full compliance of paying taxation, so that we create a growth path for the SMEs to enable them to scale up? So the business regulatory environment, can we look at it from an SME perspective and also from the big organization perspective, and we are not regulating all of them the same way?
Thank you for that intervention, Mary. And Dr. Habil, let me flip the same question to you, but now in a different sense. And elections ahead, of course, the risk profile is changing a bit. There's a lot of concern that, especially when we look at where the government yields are going, for instance, that we shall see banks now shying even more away from MSMEs. What would you say to those MSMEs who are extremely worried about your risk appetite as banks?
Yeah, I think maybe about the fear, they should not be worried. Things will not get any worse. But having said that, I think there are a number of reasons why that perception could be there. And I think those are the areas that we need to address. So for example, when we talked about lack of data, the informality, I think we need to create some partnerships that will be able to support the MSMEs to go into formality. So like, for example, at the KBA, we have got an initiative. We call it Inuka SME program. Now that Inuka program is meant to be capacity building the SMEs so that they can then be able to build the necessary structures so that they move away from informality into formality. And you've seen some good progress happening through the partnership with the business registration service. We now see a number of them moving from informality into formality, a number of them getting KRA pins, and therefore being able to start, complying, at least showing some element of compliance. And a number of service providers, a number of entities that will be reviewing them will look at the fact that you have actually formalized and you are tax compliant as a first step towards being able to provide access. Now, the other thing is things like, for example, a number of these entities are not able to access credit for various reasons, and one of them is lack of collateral. And I think that lack of collateral issue, we need to look at it a little bit more seriously and what we need to do about it. And there are a number of initiatives in place, although not adequate. So I'll give one example. Under the National Treasury, we have got something we call the Credit Guarantee Scheme. It's a scheme that is being driven by the National Treasury, supported by the banks. So already 7 banks are part of the participating financial institutions under that program. What happens with the program is that a bank will lend money to an entity, an SME. In the event of default, part of that amount is covered by the scheme. So that the bank does not bear the brunt of the whole exposure. And that then enables banks to be able to start extending credit to this specific entity. So it's working. There is already some money that has been put aside by the government. And so we already have entities that are participating. The good news is that, in fact, today we are being told by the National Treasury that already there are development financial institutions, development partners that have shown interest, given the success that it has achieved, they have shown interest in bringing in capital. So the bigger the fund, the more financial institution will be able to leverage on it to provide more access to funding for the SMEs, which is good news for us. The other one is the fact that we have, for a long time, relied on the land and building as the form of collateral that financial institutions have used. Unfortunately, most of these SMEs have not built enough property value to be able to provide that collateral to the financial institutions. Now, fortunately, there is a process that is coming up where we have got the movable property security registry. Now, that registry can take in the unconventional, what I can call unconventional collateral. So like, for example, receivables for a company can now be used as collateral. Things like, for example, equipment that you have in the office. Things like furniture and fittings can now be used as collateral. It even goes further. Agricultural assets, the agricultural produce you have, can actually now be used as collateral. So it just needs to be registered in the registry and then popularizing it in terms of making it, creating the awareness by both the consumer in terms of the borrower and the financial institutions to start using it as collateral. So that will then open up a whole host of availability of credit to institutions that initially could not access because of lack of collateral. And there are a number of other initiatives that you can think about in terms of what challenges do the MSMEs have, and what can we do to address the challenge.
Let me hold you there, Dr. Habil, and cross over to Sharia before we take a break. Sharia, there's a lot of questions coming in regarding the safety when you talk about the digitization, especially for MSMEs. How would you comment to that, to those who are holding concerns regarding their safety?
Yeah, well, interestingly, Mastercard is at the forefront of pioneering and implementing standards that secure the digital payment landscape. So we deliver cybersecurity solutions that help SME protect their business and their customers. If you look at customers in Kenya and their changing behaviors, 42% of Kenyan consumers say they plan to use biometric verification methods like fingerprint authorization, and nearly 7 out of 10 feel safer using biometrics to verify a purchase versus the PIN. Kenya is seeing a surge in the popularity of digital money. As you know, 77% of Kenyan consumers said that they were likely to use digital wallets by 2022. And 67% of the shoppers surveyed say that they feel safer storing their card information in a digital wallet platform. So innovating in cybersecurity is that continuous journey, and the forces that are on one side, which are forces for the good, and those not so. We believe that we need to be one step ahead. As Mastercard, we believe in the power of knowledge, collaboration, and technological innovation. The Global Cyber Alliance, GCA, and Mastercard recently released the free online cybersecurity toolkit to arm small business owners with basic security controls. It furthermore provides them guidance, operational tools, and recognized best practices to protect themselves from cyber risks. We have recently acquired a company called New Data as well. It uses very interesting behavioral analytics and passive biometrics to identify good digital users in real time with confidence and without adding friction. An example, so New Data technology matrices and it scores your transaction profile by looking at how you are holding your phone. Is this the normal way you generally hold your phone when you're doing a transaction? It'll score for your transaction type, your geolocation, the merchant location, the merchant that you're shopping at. It would score that. And this is all happening in an invisible layer in the background, right? Only the acquiring bank or the issuing bank is being told about the risk score coming on the back of that transaction. So it's invisible in terms of layer, but its visibility is quite effective in terms of countering cyber threats. We are also working with mobile operators, Airtel, Vodacom, Tigo, with VCN solutions. They enable a safer online purchase experience. So I think Mastercard has a lot to offer, and given that the risk infrastructure, or not just the infrastructure, actually the risk that we are seeing elevating and escalating as online digital commerce picks up, we have new tools that we're bringing into Kenya and into the East African market to counter those risks.
Thank you for that, Sharia. And I can see Kipkori Ronald is saying, in my experience, the main hindrance to digitization for SMEs is the cost and know-how. We shall be taking a lot more of your views right after this break. We shall be right back, so stay tuned.
How do you keep your toilets clean?
I use normal detergent and bleach for washing.
The detergent and bleach cleanless can leave behind yellowness, rust, and germs. Harpic's 10 times better cleaning compared to regular detergents and bleach, and kills 99.9% illness-causing germs in your toilet, including the COVID-19 virus.
Good morning, Janet.
Wow, a morning person. And you are?
I'm Casey, and I'll help you with anything to do with your KCB bank account. Pay bills, transfers, statement.
You're hired.
I'm your internet banking security ninja. And with the app for your mobile phone, we can hit the road together. Need a ride?
Let's go.
Alrighty, with you anywhere, anytime.
Register at your nearest branch for KCB Internet Banking today.
We asked Kenyan women to tell us what they look for in a lotion. Ladies, what is most important to you when buying lotion?
Smoothness, scent, glow.
Today, we are testing an expensive body lotion versus an affordable one. Ungenunua gani? Why pay more? Get great quality at an affordable price. It's just nicer and lovelier. Chagua, Kenya's #1 body lotion.
While prices of most items are skyrocketing, your favorite peanut butter is now available at reduced prices. It's made with 100% pure peanuts and a rich source of omega-6, helping you grow healthy and happy kids. Buy and enjoy Blue Band peanut butter at reduced prices today. Made possible through local farming in Kenya.
How do you keep your toilets clean?
I use normal detergent and bleach for washing.
The detergent and bleach cleanless can leave behind yellowness, rust, and germs. Harpic's 10 times better cleaning compared to regular detergents and bleach, and kills 99.9% illness-causing germs in your toilet, including the COVID-19 virus.
karibu member.
Welcome back to the Nation Leadership Forum. Tonight we are focusing on micro, small and medium-sized businesses and how we can support them to scale their ventures. And we have a power panel with us from Mastercard, Kasha Global, KEPSA and the Kenya Bankers Association. Before the break, Sharia from Mastercard was telling us about digitization and the security elements and the solutions that Mastercard is bringing on board. Let me now flip the conversation to Joanna. Joanna, Kasha has raised significant amount of money in the private transaction space away from commercial banks. Could you just give us some insight into your investor readiness journey, because many would be curious to know, how do you do this?
Sure. Yes, it's definitely a journey and an evolving journey as well. The exciting thing is there's definitely more and more global capital flowing into the continent. So more and more investors are investing into businesses within Kenya, within the rest of Africa as well. With Kasha, we actually started in Rwanda. And when you start a business at the beginning, you don't have very much data, right? And so you do bootstrap, you get the money you need at the beginning. But pretty soon we had customer data. And so we were able to bring on angel investors. There's more and more angel investors within the continent of Africa. So individual, high net worth individuals that are investing in companies, including technology companies as well. And then this enabled us to get some more runway to be able to further grow. At which point we also brought in impact investors. We brought in local venture capital as well. And that enabled us to get to the next level. We brought in also corporate strategic partners. So Mastercard has made an equity investment into Kasha as well. So being able to have strategic partnerships and with that partnership being on a deeper level in terms of the company's success. And we've also been able to bring on DFIs. So several development finance institutions, which continue the growth. So it is absolutely a journey. It's starting at the beginning. Data is absolutely critical. Being able to leverage that data to bring comfort to how the operations are running, the economics of the operations, that forecasting the future over the next 5 years, for example, is critical. So, and for now, we're seeing more and more interest from global venture capitalists as well. And I think that this is a very exciting time for especially technology-enabled businesses within Africa. About 5 years ago, there were no unicorns on the continent, companies that are valued at over $1 billion. Now we have 8 on the continent, and they're saying the next ones are coming from Kenya. So it's a very exciting time, and the capital will continue to increase into this market.
Thank you so much, Joanna. And the bottom line of what Joanna is telling us is that data, and get your books in order to be investor ready is the key here. Let me come to Mary Ngeshu. Mary, Habil and I were having this conversation around the credit guarantee scheme. In your assessment, as someone who oversees a lot of MSMEs and who also runs some of them, how has this changed the landscape in terms of SMEs accessing credit?
The credit guarantee scheme has helped a lot because a lot of SMEs have been able to access the guarantee fund. And the banks that have been working to dispense the credit guarantee fund, I think one of the biggest challenges that we are having is the uptake of the credit guarantee. From a private sector perspective, I would say that having been given a credit guarantee within the first year, and especially after COVID, I would have expected that 100% of the credit guarantee has been taken or has been utilized by the SMEs. But I think there is an issue in how the banks are assessing or they look at the risk of the SMEs, and also the SMEs not being ready to be able to access that money. In readiness in terms of how they do their bookkeeping, how they do their records. So there's a bit of mismatch between the stages where the SMEs are and how the banks are assessing or assessing the risk of the SMEs. So as much as we have the Credit Guarantee Fund, I think there need to be a bit more intervention from a private sector angle, collaboration between the banks, the government, and the SMEs to really know what those barriers or those problems are, so that we can really be able to unlock that potential of the Credit Guarantee Fund. A lot of other funds have been given. If KEPSA, I know with the help of Mastercard, we had a fund that we were able to give people, and I talked about it earlier, where we were able to give up to 1.5 million that were collateral-free and interest-free. But when you come into going into the banking, into the mainstream financing in Kenya, as much as there's a credit guarantee fund, you're still required to offer a bit of some collateral. And I think that is still a challenge and a problem that needs to be addressed. Other alternative financing, we've talked about angel investors and equity partners. SMEs, looking from a global perspective, you'd look into how do we define our SMEs. We are talking about mama mbogas, we are talking about kiosk SMEs, but really, are you looking for an angel investor for a kiosk SME? We have a medium space SMEs who are growth oriented. I think those are the ones who will be highly potential for equity partners. And when we look into the solutions of capacity building or the products that we are creating in our country, we need to stop having a one-stop solution for all. We need to maybe categorize and look into how it is that we look into the micro, the small, and the medium, so that we come up with products that fit the micro, the small, and the medium. And at KEPSA Sector Board, those are issues that we are looking and we are working on. A lot of initiatives have been done in this country that are trying to address the issues of the SME. But they are all scattered, and we are trying to harmonize them so that we can be able to analyze and really understand why are we still not scaling the SME despite all the initiatives that are there.
All right. Dr. Habil, very quickly, we are having the conversation in this country around the transition to a risk-based pricing model. Various banks are engaging the market regulator on this, and MSMEs are concerned about this. What does this mean for them, especially when you consider how their risk is largely perceived by lenders? If you could comment on that.
Yeah, I think maybe just to pull back a little bit, we are coming from a period when there was interest capping. And the interest capping law had quite some significant impact on specifically the MSMEs because of the fact that banks could not be able to, or rather the assessment of the risk on the MSMEs fell way above what was prescribed in the law. So when the interest is capped, it means that there's a risk appetite beyond which you will not be able to accommodate within the price that has been capped. So a number of MSMEs actually fell off, and so they were not able to access credit within that pricing band. Now, when the interest rate capping was removed, there was the move by the regulator to bring in a risk-based pricing framework in the market. And so each institution was required to come up with a model on how they are going to implement that risk-based pricing framework. And so a number of them have got their respective models, which are being discussed with the regulator. Once the regulator is happy, he then approves it. What that means is that then a bank is able to assess the risk and be able to price it accordingly. Because otherwise, if the bank cannot be able to price the risk, then they cannot be able to provide the credit. So the worry should not be so much in terms of the fact that banks will increase their lending price. What will happen is that the high-risk borrowers will be able to access the credit at their respective pricing range. Previously, before that, the problem was that the credit was cheap because it was capped, but they could not access. The difference now would be that they'll be able to access, they'll be able to be assessed appropriately and then be priced accordingly and therefore be able to access the credit. Okay. So the difference now is the fact that you at least have now access at the appropriate pricing. And I think going forward, there are mechanisms that can be put in place to de-risk these borrowers. A number of the reasons why they are assessed and they're perceived to be high risk is because of some specific factors. Things like, for example, the informality I've talked about, things like inappropriate collateral, for which we are now putting in place measures, things like when the data is available, we are now able to assess the credit risk appropriately. When you have had, for example, a previous history in terms of repayment through the credit information sharing mechanism, you now build a profile. And therefore, the financier is able to assess you based on your profile and therefore give you the appropriate grading accordingly. So there are many mechanisms you can put in place to ensure that the MSMEs are de-risked and therefore be able to be priced appropriately.
So there's no need to worry for
there shouldn't be a need to worry. I think we just have to develop the market and build it as we go along.
All right. Sharia, there's a question here. Does Mastercard do anything as far as technical assistance for MSMEs is concerned, especially with regard to readiness for investment?
Thank you. Well, yeah, you see, knowledge and trust are major hurdles in any financial transaction, and financial education must be part of any solution rollout for underserved communities. There is a need to demystify some of the misconceptions around electronic money, including costs, security concerns, ease of access, etc. You know, in Kenya, for example, Mastercard is partnering under Dr. Alaka's patronage in Kachonjo. Which is a campaign it's a biannual initiative by the Kenyan Bankers Association designed to educate the public on how the financial sector is combating safety concerns, including cybersecurity and data protection. Our Mastercard Center for Inclusive Growth is providing philanthropic support to enable financial literacy training and access to vital tools for women MSMEs in the underserved markets. Through initiatives such as the Mastercard Accelerate, we are igniting the next generation of fintech disruptors to build the future of commerce. Our highly successful Start Path program aims to support startups and aid them through our tech training on how to scale their business and manage their investments. So we have a full 360-degree view of what MSMEs need to really set up, manage, and scale their business sustainably. And I think that's these are some of the efforts that we have put in place already, and we are continuing to coming up with new ways and methods in which we enrich the MSME ecosystem.
Thank you for that, Sharia. Joanna, let me come to you. And one point which Madam Mary here raised, and I'm seeing that question online, is that the sort of investors you have mentioned having invested in Kasha, do they have ticket sizes that would fit the micro small business in the Kenyan context, and what sort of advice would you give them?
Yeah, I mean, you start at the beginning, right? So the ticket sizes increase as you grow. But I think the key piece, and this goes back to data, right? Investment absolutely requires trust, transparency, digitization, forecasting. And so being able to come to investors with a 5-year financial model based on historical data and having an overview presentation that shows the vision of the company, all these things are important. And there's different visions for different companies as well. Being able to run a small, profitable business is very different from wanting to run a global technology platform that IPOs. So picking the right investors that understand the right level of risk and then invest at the ticket size accordingly is important. So we absolutely have started with small individual investors, but we've also grown into larger multi-million-dollar investments as well. But data and digitization and forecasting and analysis is key.
All right. Thank you for that. Let me come to Dr. Habil. There's a question here for you. And the question is asking, does the banking charter still exist? And the proposition that it had for SMEs, is it still being upheld? Very briefly.
The banking charter was an initiative by the central bank and is still very much applicable. In fact, a number of the initiatives that are coming up currently, including risk-based pricing, was coming out of the banking charter that was set up, initiated by the central bank and applicable to all the regulated entities. So yes, it's applicable.
Thank you for that, Habil. Madam Mary Ngeshu, question here regarding the challenges that MSMEs are facing regarding access to markets is how significant a hurdle is that?
I think the biggest challenge that SMEs are having is access to market, and there are different reasons why they have they are not being able to access the market, because if they are not formalized and the market requires them some sort of compliance in terms of standard, then they also are not able to access that market. Then access to finance, the difficulties and challenges that we are talking about, that they are not able to access market finance to finance their production so that they can be able to access those markets. Access to technology, research and development, so that they're able to be innovative and develop products that they can be able to meet the standards or meet the needs of the consumer market. There are a lot of initiatives that have been put by the governments, including the Free Africa Continental Trade, the East Africa Regional Trade Treaty agreements that have been put together. But the question comes then, as a government, as we are signing those treaty agreements, what are we then backward doing to make sure that our SMEs or the micros are able to access those markets? And this is the reason why at KEPSA, we are working closely with the government so that we're able to give them information on exactly the challenges that are there, because government is an enabler. They will create a good enabling working environment, but the private sector, then you have to come and take advantage of that. And I talked about aggregating product and services. If you look like, if I want to send my products to Ghana, and maybe I have a small capacity, which is what SMEs have. If you look at the logistical cost and the infrastructure of what you're talking about, even that transaction or digital transaction, if I have to send my money, I can do the transaction digitally, but physically I have to send my product to Ghana. Okay. Do I have that capacity to do that? I think those are some of the gaps and the challenges that SMEs face, and they're not able to access the markets. All right.
Sharia, a question here for you. Is there anything, when Mastercard is extending its support, how does it factor in climate change considerations, given how big the conversation is right now?
Well, that's such an important question. And you know, we look at Mastercard, we look at our environment globally through this virtuous triangle. So on one side of the triangle is those excluded parts of our society who don't have access to, not counted. You know, if you don't have an ID, for example, you are not counted. Your voice doesn't matter. You know, you don't have access to financial services. So that's on one side of that triangle. If you look at the other side of the triangle, it's man versus nature, where we, in our quest for short-term gains, we compromise in our decisions, and we don't look at the future effects of what that could lead to. And this question of yours falls exactly into that bucket. So Mastercard has gone ahead and actually put a commitment of planting 1 billion trees. And this is not just about planting. This is about planting and then managing that through careful monitoring and tracking of the CO2 emissions and how they're going to be reduced. We are also bringing out apps whereby a consumer of an FI or a fintech or a telco can simply able to see their CO2 footprint. So as they use their card or their account or any of the other Mastercard's multi-rail solutions, they'll be able to track that. And when they track it, they're able to also then take a decision that, oh, if I have spent or I have expended CO2 worth X, I need to plant 4 trees, and therefore that payment option would be seamlessly plugged in. So that is an asset that is getting a lot of attention in Kenya and in East Africa. We've got projects live in McQueeney County already, and a lot of our partners, and this is not about a single entity doing what it can. It's about bringing everybody in the ecosystem together. We've got airlines, we've got banks, we've got fintechs. There's a whole list of stakeholders who are partnering with us, and I believe that together, when we partner like that, the impact is much bigger, sustainable, stronger, and I think beneficial in the overall scheme of things. So again, my message is just to ensure that there is a good balance between how we look at short-termism versus long-termism, and sustainability is key agenda. Youth, which is the population of Africa. Africa has one of the youngest populations. they are already telling us through surveys that they want to be connected to a social cause, and that social cause to be relevant in all aspects of their financial services. And so we must answer the call and take the responsibility as well.
Joanna, we have a minute to take a break, but very quickly, there's a question here regarding, could you please share some insights as far as your corporate governance is concerned? Clearly, this is a huge challenge facing not just MSMEs, many businesses.
Yeah, corporate governance, definitely the depth that you go into is different as you scale. So for the way that we've grown, at least, is when we got our first investors, we brought them onto our board. And having regular board meetings, having the corporate governance is absolutely critical to building trust and that infrastructure to be able to, have more investment into the company. And so as we've grown, we've brought on also larger scale investors. With that comes more requirements as well, implementation of policies. With the DFIs, it's ESMS, environmental social management systems. And so all of those things are extremely important, and they make you operate at a stronger level. And so while they, sometimes when you're running really fast as a business, you have many priorities. You could think of deprioritizing that. It's absolutely critical to growing a strong business. So we've always prioritized corporate governance as a key factor for us.
Dr. Habil, in 1 minute, maybe your thoughts on this issue of corporate governance in MSMEs?
Yeah, I think in assessing a credit facility, there are a number of things that an assessor looks for. So, for example, things like assessing the character of the individual, assessing the capacity of the proposal to generate the cash flows to be able to repay itself and then repay the financier. And then there is also the issue of assessing the collateral. Now, when you talk about corporate governance, and we can widen it a little bit and talk about ESG, environmental, social, and governance aspects in terms of risk assessment, it becomes relevant in assessing any of these factors. So when you're talking about the individual's character, in other words, the likelihood of the individual to repay back, the ESG assessment is quite critical in arriving at assessment of the character. If you look at the cash flow, the capacity of the entity to be able to repay back, you've got to look at the ESG factors in terms of how they affect your assessment of the capacity of the individual to repay. If you look at the collateral, a number of the awkward collaterals that entities are sitting with, part of it became problematic because of the governance issues around it. So that you're given a collateral that is possibly a cemetery somewhere. You see, you're given collateral that is sitting in a marsh and you think that is prime land. So all those challenges that financial institutions face at the end of the day is because of the governance issues with the entities. So I think to answer your question, governance is so critical in terms of assessing the risk of the borrower. And MSMEs even are much more relevant for this question than anybody else.
Okay. Madam Mary, your thoughts on this issue of corporate governance?
I think when you talk about corporate governance for MSMEs in Kenya, the first thing they think is having a board. And like me, who owns and manages a business with my husband, I'll think it's me, my husband, and maybe my son that will make a board. But I think there's much more in corporate governance that the SMEs need to understand. It is the practice, the processes, the rules that governs an organization, so that you're able to be accountable to your stakeholders. And stakeholders who mean from the financier to your customers, to the community, and also to your employees and everybody who is in the stakeholder for doing to run the organization. At KEPSA, we are hand-holding and mentoring and coaching the small SMEs so that we are able to walk them the journey of corporate governance, so that they don't just look at having a board, but they understand how to put up the structure, the operating standard procedures for their processes, so that then they are more understood by a financial or any investor who would come on board. So it's critical. It is expensive in time, not necessarily in time, and it requires discipline and commitment, and those are some of the things that we are working with our SMEs.
Sharia, your thoughts on this issue of corporate governance? Clearly, many questions on the same. Let me just get your thoughts on the same.
Well, yes, I think the corporate governance, stems from again, to the virtuous triangle that I was talking about, with the very base, when you're looking at a business model and you're looking at short-termism of it or the long-termism of it, you need to look at how is that business going to be sustainable. And I think when you look at today's boards, you need to really that front and center of the table and say, are we actually leading and delivering the real value that the ecosystem wants from us? And when we talk about MSMEs, we really need to come out as those hand-holding partners who help across the entire experience and the value chain and the supply chain of an MSME, and try to build a wholesome, healthy, growing environment. So I think from a corporate governance perspective, from big corporates and key stakeholders, that's something of a request. But if we look at SMEs themselves, and I totally agree with Mary's point. I mean, it's basically down to who is running that MSME, and generally it's 2 to 3 people. It's generally your family. And I was recently on Mombasa Road, went to visit a few of the dokas, and you clearly see that the challenges that they're facing are at a totally different level, right? It's a matter of, in some cases, matter of survival. As you know, we live in a VUCA world these days. Shocks are coming one after the other. And really, sometimes, I guess, you're just looking at where can I get that support? And I think that's the support that we really need to provide. And all of us collaborating together, partnering together, and most importantly, listening to the MSMEs. Because as the world is changing, so are the challenges that the MSMEs are facing. And I think the first thing is to listen collectively and then design solutions which can help build sustainable growth for their businesses.
All right. And Dr. Habil Olaka, there's a question here which I think you would be best positioned to address. The question of pending bills, just how much is it impacting MSMEs, especially when it comes to accessing credit?
Yeah. One of the, as I mentioned earlier, one of the key critical things in assessing credit, actually there are 3 things I would say. One of them is the character of the borrower, which means the willingness to pay, even if you've got the capacity. Now then the next one is the capacity to repay, which is you assess the cash flows. You see, now the cash flows of these MSMEs, unfortunately, most of them supply services to, be it government, be it fellow private sector players. Now, the inability to pay or the delay in paying them back means that they cannot be able to generate the cash flows to meet their own obligations, which include meeting the obligations of the financier. Now, there was a bill that was that has been in the process of quite a bit of the prompt payments bill. You see, if that bill was passed with the provisions required, whereby at least the MSME that is applying services to various entities can be paid in time, or else you incur penalties, so that there's some way of forcing the entities that do get services from the MSMEs to pay them in time, then the MSMEs will be able to meet the obligations in time. And so from a credit assessment point of view, when you are sure that the cash flows will be coming in as projected, then you are able to make a better assessment and therefore extend the credit. So it will de-risk them and therefore be able to access credit.
All right. Thank you for that. My director is telling me we are running out of time. Let me get into the closing thoughts. And let me start with Joanna. And there's a question here for you, Joanna, as you give your closing thoughts. Is Kasha doing anything to support women who run MSMEs? If you could just take that, Joanna.
And I just want to clarify something, that focusing on women is not a charity case. It is not a social issue. It is a massive business opportunity. When you look at women and the decision makers that they are within the rest of the population, it's huge. Women make the decision on 80% of the purchases that get brought into the home. 80% of consumer goods and household goods are decided by women. When you look at healthcare for the family, women are the primary decision maker there. They own 60% of the shops. Their health needs alone are huge, right? I mean, if you look at something just menstrual care, women purchase products for that every month for over 40 years of their life. So focusing on women both as consumers as well as shop owners and business owners, is absolutely critical, and it's a massive business opportunity. And I think as we see more and more women enter STEM programs, computer science, I'm an engineer by trade, a computer scientist, you'll see more platforms that are optimized for women's needs, and that's going to open up a huge market opportunity as well.
Thank you for that. Let's get closing thoughts very quickly from Marion Geshu, very briefly.
Thank you. KEPSA is an apex body for the private sector. And what we are asking as the SME sector board is that we collaborate together as private sector, or the business associations that are dealing with SME sectors, so that we can be able to come up with a harmonized, collaborated, coordinated voice, and we scale up the SMEs.
Thank you. Dr. Habil, very briefly.
Yeah, for me, it's the fact that today it's interesting because today we were launching the beginning of what we call the Inua Biashara Day, and it's followed by a virtual trade show. And the virtual trade show is the fact that banks will be showcasing what innovative products they have come up with to support the MSMEs. And the MSMEs also on the same platform, they are able to showcase what products they have and needing access to financing. So this is a platform where the two can come together and exchange, what they have to offer. So my message to them would be the fact that banks already, there are about 30 banks already on the platform. The MSMEs, please come forward. Participate in the exchange of information, and you never know, you could just meet your partner there.
Sharia, your closing thoughts for this.
Thank you. Well, just like Apple is not selling Apple fruits and Amazon is not a shop by the river, in Amazon, Mastercard is not a card company. It is a payment solutions technology company, and it does much more. And I believe that, given our multi-layered strategy and our strengths, we would like to bring them out through our partners. As you know, we are a B2B2C company. So we would like to bring it out through our partners to support the MSMEs and their customers as they transact across any channel and to any endpoint. It would be a tremendous disservice if we don't support the MSMEs during the volatile times they're facing. When the time for accelerated growth comes, we will all be counting on a vibrant MSME segment in Kenya to fuel that growth, and we must not fall into the trap of short-termism. That's my message for today. Last point, we at Mastercard will continue to use technology and data-driven insights, because to all the panelists' point around data being at the center of all of this, data-driven insights will be used to make payments more secure, convenient, efficient, for MSMEs everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sherry. And that takes us to the close of the Nation Leadership Forum, focusing on MSMEs. News is up next.
Wow, it has been an amazing 8